Coming to you from Button Studios in MCB. My name is Raj Mahida, and today's biggest story, Escherichia coli, better known as E. coli. This bacteria just might be the future of renewable energy and plastics. Yes, that's the same E. coli that's swimming around in your stomach right now. Now, that might be a little scary, but only some strains of E. coli are actually dangerous. Most are pretty safe to human beings, and so we can use those E. coli to help change the world, and people have been doing just that. We can use E. coli to produce biofuels and even plastics. All you need is a little bit of sugar. These bacteria are just 2.5 microns long and then about half a micron in diameter. Now, I know you're really excited to learn more about this, so let me turn it over to our senior correspondent in the field, John Blaeser. He's an expert in the geography and history of E. coli. Stay tuned.
Hi, thanks for tuning in. I'm John. Since its discovery in 1885, E. coli has served as a multi-tool for many different fields, providing a renewable alternative to many common materials. In a sporadic turn of events and a reclassifying of genera, Bacterium coli's name was changed to honor its discoverer's name and has since been known as Escherichia coli. In 1978, the first and arguably most important of advances occurred when E. coli was genetically engineered to produce insulin for humans. At the turn of the 21st century, in an effort to create a more sustainable process for producing plastics, E. coli was again utilized for the production of propanediol. Then again in 2010, researchers were able to engineer the bacteria to produce butanediol, another precursor for plastics. Both of these advancements work to curb the huge amounts of petrochemicals that are used for the production of plastic. In 2011, the discovery of biodiesel-producing strains of E. coli opened up an entire industry for biorenewable fuels. Moving on, E. coli isn't restricted to any geographical environment in particular. In fact, they can survive in almost every climate. The real challenge is finding a suitable country or organization with the pre-existing infrastructure and willingness to invest in renewable resources. Back to you, Raj.
Thanks, John. That was really helpful. So now, we've got something else to go to. We need to talk about the ecology of E. coli. And for that, we have no one but the best. Joseph Schroeder, with a dual Ph.D. in ecology and economics. Let's turn over to him right now.
Thanks, Raj. Alright, so now we're going to discuss the ecology of E. coli. So the scientific name of this organism is Escherichia coli, better known as E. coli. Now, E. coli can be found in many different places in many different environments. One common environment is in the intestines of different animals and humans. Now, in the intestines of humans and animals, E. coli is a harmless strain. And on that topic, there are many different strains of E. coli, though very few of them are bad, though the bad ones get the most press. Now, E. coli, like I said, grows in intestines, which is a rather acidic environment, but E. coli can survive in a lot of different environments, and one of those environments is when you grow it in a culture. Now, when you grow E. coli in a culture, it can sometimes show up with a green tint, and you usually see fairly fast growth. Now, the optimal conditions are around 37 degrees Celsius in an incubator, and you have to add luria broth and have an agar plate. And if you really wanted to, you could make this at home, though it's not recommended. But growing a culture, usually the growth that you'll see will be about doubling in 20 minutes if it's at optimal conditions, which is fairly fast growth. Now, the implications of using E. coli are relatively low in the environmental sense. E. coli doesn't take much for resources. All you really need is some sugars and you can grow it. So there's not too many problems on an environmental aspect. There is a lot of social concern, though, around using E. coli, which is rather misplaced. The social concern comes in around the people who are worried that it's dangerous to others, dangerous to people's health, because they only identify E. coli with the dangerous strain of it. But the E. coli that's used in labs for producing things is not dangerous to humans. It's not the deadly strain. So I want to thank you all for tuning into this riveting discussion of the ecology of E. coli. Back to you, Raj.
Thanks, Joseph. Now that we've discussed the ecology of E. coli, let's go into the inner workings of the bacteria by talking about the biology and chemistry. I'm turning it over to our senior consultant, Raj Mahida, who spent over 25 years studying the biology and chemistry of E. coli. Raj? Hi there. Let's talk about chemistry and biology of E. coli. E. coli is very interesting. It's really tiny, actually. It's a little cylinder about 2.5 microns long, about 0.5 microns in diameter. Compare that to a human being who's about 1 to 2 meters tall and varying in diameter. Also, E. coli has 5 megabase pairs, compared to humans, which have over 3,000. And what that means is that E. coli only has about 5,000 proteins in its entire system, which makes it easy to control when running experiments. And that's why it's used in so many experiments to produce different things such as polymers or biofuels. Now, the native strain of E. coli isn't actually very good at producing, say, polymers or the monomers that produce those polymers. And so these strains are genetically modified by inserting a DNA plasmid into the E. coli to make it so that it can efficiently produce these precursors. Some really promising polymer precursors or polymers themselves are polylactate coglycolate, 1,4-butanediol, and polylactic acid. Now, polylactic acid specifically is actually one that is a direct polymer that can be used as a renewable polymer source. And this is a very huge breakthrough in polymer science. In recent years, E. coli has also been used to produce biodiesels. Specifically, one of the main components is a fatty acid methyl ester. Now, this is something that can be used to produce biodiesels, and the key enzyme that was engineered into the E. coli is fatty acid methyltransferase. So what this can do is actually provide a source for renewable energy, which is something that has never been previously done before. And all you need to add is a feed source, like sugars, something like glucose, sucrose, or xylose. Now, why isn't this used currently? I'm sure you're asking yourself, well, we better get on it. This is one of the greatest things that has ever come to being. The issue is that currently the production rate of something such as butanediol or any other polymer has maxed out at around 19 grams per liter, which is nothing compared to the efficiencies or the production rates of the petroleum industry. And so more investing is needed to produce these polymers and fuels on a large scale. And this is something that we need to do because current production rates using petroleum won't last forever. Back to you, Raj. Thank you, Raj, for that tantalizing discussion of the biology and chemistry of E. coli. Now, you as a viewer probably have this natural question in your head. How does E. coli get processed? Well, we've got the perfect person to answer that question. Let's turn to our Director of Processing Analysis, Dr. Natalie Vig.
Thanks, Raj. Primarily, I'll be focusing on the use of E. coli to produce N-butanol, which can be implemented as a biofuel within the existing infrastructure. There are two main pathways which can be used to produce N-butanol, a proposed substitute to traditional gasoline. This is extremely important because it can be mixed in any quantity with gasoline without the need for retrofitting engines and can be phased in relatively slowly as developments continue to increase the efficiency of production, as opposed to ethanol, which can only be mixed to a certain extent without the need for modification of the engine or vehicle itself. Additionally, ethanol has a 30% lower energy density than traditional gasoline, making it less efficient as a fuel source than the current petrol-reliant fuel sources. Additionally, N-butanol has a vapor pressure 11 times less than that of gasoline, which leads to less air quality problems when burned as a fuel. Traditionally, the pathway used to create this is a fermentative one. This entails a chemical reaction whereby glucose is transformed into pyruvate and acetobutylicum to ultimately form N-butanol. As a byproduct of this reaction, CO2, butyrate, acetone, and ethanol are released from this natural redox reaction. To complete this reaction in E. coli, the genetic code which creates the N-butanol is cloned and inserted into the bacterium. The E. coli itself isn't allowed to reproduce, creating the desired compound. Any undesired byproducts then get extracted using various enzymes specifically chosen to eliminate the contaminants present. Currently, under this production method, the yield has only been able to produce 0.5 grams per liter of N-butanol. The other method by which N-butanol can be produced using E. coli is the keto acid pathway. This entails 6 chemical reactions which begin from glucose and ultimately produce N-butanol. Using this method, yield can be increased to 0.9 grams per liter of N-butanol. Although this is a higher efficiency production method, it is still not sufficient for economic implementation of this biofuel. And now, back to you, Raj.
Thank you, Natalie, for that compelling run-through of how E. coli is processed. Now, let's talk a little bit about the economics of it. And for that, I'll turn it over again to our resident Ph.D., Joseph, who has a doctorate degree in, as previously mentioned, ecology and economics. Joseph?
All right, so now we're going to discuss the economics of E. coli. So Henry Ford once said that the future of fuels would be in fuels from living things, which we now call biofuels. Now, when he said this, he was predicting something major. Now, this major thing was using things like E. coli to get a renewable fuel source. And now, what would that do? How would that affect things like jobs? Well, so if there was a world shift in the fuel industry, it would be a major effect, but not one that's necessarily negative. So, for example, how it would impact jobs would just shift. They wouldn't be lost. So jobs right now are primarily in the fossil fuel industry. As biofuels become more prevalent, they would shift over to the biofuels industry, but not really be net loss. So that change isn't a negative change. Now, it would actually, to some extent, increase employment because there'd be a lot more biofuel jobs. But it requires resources, specifically money, to produce. So that's like that starting barrier that was discussed a little earlier by one of my peers. But that requirement has been reduced, actually. The cost since 1980 has been reduced by a factor of 4, which is a massive reduction in cost to start out. Now, the other big thing that comes with switching to biofuels is more energy security and less dependence. Since it is a renewable resource, you can use it on your own. You don't have to rely on other nations. So that means that countries that adopt it as a primary energy source become far more self-sufficient. All right, thank you, and now back to you, Raj.
Thank you, Joseph, for that enlightening piece on the economics of E. coli. Now let's turn to our senior correspondent on the outlook of E. coli and what the future really entails for this incredible bacteria.
Hi, John again. E. coli has the potential to become a huge contributor to a myriad of renewable resources, offering itself as a sustainable pathway that strays from utilizing finite resources. Although the implications of this bacteria are far-reaching and quite rewarding, the cost of the equipment and space needed is a large obstacle for any group looking to adopt this emergent technology. It really isn't so much dependent on who will harness E. coli in the future, as much as it is when this technology will become a viable option for individuals, commercial entities, and entire countries alike. Here's what needs to happen. First and foremost, the yields of materials being produced with E. coli needs to increase to provide an incentive for industries to actually adopt the technology. One thing petrochemicals currently have over methods utilizing E. coli bacteria is how much more material they actually produce compared to E. coli. It's one thing to create a sustainable pathway. It's an entirely different challenge to engineer E. coli into a suitable alternative that people will actually want to use. Tailoring this technology to the monetary desires of businesses is essential. Looking at the bigger picture, the stigma surrounding E. coli and other biorenewable resources needs to change to reflect the potential of these technologies. E. coli is no longer a buzzword pertaining to an unpleasant bout of incontinence, but rather a tool at the forefront of many fields. A bacteria as numerous in applications as it is in active cultures in your gut, it will be exciting to see what the world does with E. coli. Now on to senior reporter Natalie Vig to wrap up this segment.
Thanks, Raj, for bringing this story to life. Overall, it seems that the implementation of E. coli in the creation of products traditionally made using fossil fuels could be hugely impactful environmentally. Knowing E. coli can be grown almost anywhere with few dangerous strains, the impact of implementation of E. coli in the fields of plastics and renewable fuels could mean a huge improvement in the environmental impacts of both fields. The first and foremost step that needs to be taken is initiative by some country who enables the mass production of this and other biofuels on a larger scale, investing in the future of global environmental health over time. Next on MCB News, Lexus and Sriracha team up to bring us the spiciest car yet. See you next Monday.
Oh crap. Let's try that again.
So the scientific name of E. coli is Escherichia.
Hello.
Is it on?